Okay, tape's rolling, Mr. Chair.
All right, I call the August meeting of the West Dakota Water Development District to order. And the first item on the agenda is Pledge of Allegiance. If you can stand, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item number 2, your roll call, please.
Okay, roll call. August 10th, 2021. Koth.
Here.
Bierke.
Here.
Driscoll.
Here.
McGregor. Nautigal.
Here.
Rowe.
Here.
Mack.
Here.
Fleming.
Here.
Harris.
Here.
Okay, we have one absent. We have a quorum.
Okay, very good, thank you. The next item is to approve the agenda. Is there any items on the agenda today that need to change? I do have one item that I'd like to add to the agenda. Yes, this we have another one too. The item is rotating basin assessment project, and Jay Gilbertson from East Dakota Water Development District is going to cover that item, and it's for information only today, so he's going to go over that. He's been here before, and we've had a short discussion about this, and so he's going to visit with us about that. And that would be item 12A. And the other item is this contract extension with Midco. It's just, there's no additional cost. This is the normal monthly cost, but the contract needs to be extended. And let's put that under 10A. And Dan Raleigh will tell us about that when we get that item. Is there any other changes to the agenda? Dan?
I guess I'll let folks know that the item I thought I would add, it sounds like we prefer not to vote on it without providing 24-hour notice. I didn't realize that it was illegal. I thought that, we always try to have things up in advance, but it sounds like there's actually a question of legality on it. Is this Midco thing something we've got to vote on, or?
It's, I gotta do something by the 21st, so it would be best to take care of it, yeah.
It's considered an emergency.
Yeah, and it's strictly an
The fire
administrative.
was just a fire. Anyhow, I guess we'll hold off on that.
This monthly cost really is the same. It's just the contract itself is extended. We pay for this monthly. It's a monthly phone bill.
Anyhow, I'll hold off on that item.
Okay, any other items?
I'll
Can I
move
ask a
to
question,
approve.
Chairman? What are we holding off on, Dan?
I had emailed an item, maybe you've not seen it, in which case the point is moved for you.
Got it.
There's
Okay, thank you.
representatives here from the School of Mines that are going to give us an update on this project and then tell us what happened with the fire up there. But we'll do that under items from the public.
Very good. Thank you.
Did you have a motion for approval?
I was going to move to approve with the
Is
changes.
there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Tom. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Item number 4 is approval of minutes from the July meeting. Linda, do you have any, that's under your name, do you have anything?
I'll open it up if anybody had comments or questions.
Move to approve.
Move for approval by Dan Driscoll. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Wendy. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item number 5 is conflict of interest disclosure. Is there any items today on the agenda that any board member would have a conflict of interest? If so, say so now. Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 6, which is the treasurer's report. Dan?
Okay. Okay, treasurer's report, not really much has changed. We currently have about 566,000 funds on hand, which includes 2 CDs, 2 savings accounts, and a checking account. And I'll show you the breakout in a little bit here. Total expenditures to date, I'll keep it short here. We can jump into details if you like. But total expenditures to date are about 150,000, and we have about 69,700 remaining in the total budget. And this is just a breakdown of our funds on hand. We actually have 2 savings accounts because one account allows us to get a slightly higher interest. They call it the extreme money mark savings, which to me is a little bit hyperbole, but it gives us 0.2% interest. The checking gives us none. The business savings, I think, gives us 0.05. 12-month CD is 0.2, and the 24-month CD is 0.55% interest. And this is the status of our projects and our obligations. Currently, we have in unpaid project obligations 213,000. However, that includes 120,000 for the Green Valley Sanitary District, which will not be asked for until 2022. 125,000, thank you. So that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any questions for Dan on the treasurer's report? If not, we need a motion to approve. Motion by Cheryl, is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Tom. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you, Dan. This brings us to item number 7.
So could I get who made the motion and second?
Cheryl and Tom.
Okay.
Okay. Item number 7 is approve the annual renewal of insurance from the South Dakota Public Insurance Alliance. Huh?
So this is a carryover item from last month where we had it on our agenda, the same topic, same amount. This has more detail. We asked for our current insurance carrier to provide more detail on the costs breakout between the liability and what's called the crime insurance. So we got that. So we've got that in front of us. It's an annual payment. Director McGregor, who's not here, so I can't speak for him, he had some concerns about this in terms of insurance versus assurance. And so he wanted us to kind of see if we could go at this a little slower than paying an annual fee, maybe pay a month or 2 and do some more investigation on what we might really get in terms of insurance versus assurance. And don't ask me to explain the detailed breakdown between those 2 elements, but he was pretty forceful in kind of thinking that we need to investigate procurement of actual insurance versus the assurance. So there were some emails flying around. We asked Dan Mullally to inquire whether we could pay on a monthly basis while we do more investigation. I don't know if we got an answer for that or not.
No, I don't have an answer. I was hoping that Jerry Crambeck would be here to cover all that, so I'm not really that prepared to go into it.
So, in light of that, I guess I would be, inclined to defer to our board member who's a lawyer, in terms of his concerns, and maybe move that we pay an incremental amount of this insurance to give us some more time to investigate the differences between the assurance and the insurance. Maybe pay, 2 months worth, and go from there. So I'd make a motion to pay, a prorated amount of the full bill broken into, monthly increments, and pay 2 months to give us time.
All right, there's a motion on the
Could
floor,
I-
Is there a second to it?
Could I comment quick? Jerry said he is available by phone if we want to call him. So I'll throw that out there.
Given that, Director McGregor's not here, I don't know if we would gain all that much, and we wouldn't satisfy his concerns to discuss this, so I don't know if it's worth calling Jerry today, or give us a couple of months to figure this out.
And maybe he would be able to be here too.
Yeah, maybe he's got his health issue fixed by then and back
Yeah,
out.
that would be nice if he did. I absolutely don't have any idea what the difference is either, personally.
So, I'm looking it up, if I may speak.
Sure,
We have all
Could
this
could I, could I get the motion worded?
That's- Okay, Ron, you wanna,
I'd move to approve a prorated amount for 2 months, of the current, assurance that we have, at this point.
is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Linda, now, discussion.
Well, this is just what I've looked up, so this is the first time I've ever heard of that too. Terms insurance and assurance are used frequently and interchangeably in the financial industry. Insurance provides financial coverage for unforeseen circumstances surrounding an event such as fire, theft, or flooding. Assurance provides coverages for events that will occur such as death. And I'm sure there's more to it, but, I guess, okay, never mind.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with it at all. I think-
Okay, but I understand that, but I think it's disrespectful to interrupt. Thank you. That's right. I'm good.
Very good, okay.
And, change insurance to assurance. I think that's what Ron had said,
Yeah, that's assurance.
coverage.
Yeah, I meant to just give us a little breathing room to kind of figure this out, so I thought a couple months might be,
Again, can I ask
Yeah,
the
yeah.
other, admin Dan a question?
Sure.
So, when does our policy expire on this officially?
24th of August.
Well, that's,
Because that's the payment date, I just didn't know.
Effective date.
Because what I'm trying to think of, because my fear is in October, because we do this, let's say we kick it to 10/21, as the due date is the actual policy date, and then we are undecided. I'm almost wondering if we should pay it throughout the year 2021, and then if we are still undecided by October, December, we can figure it out. Because I feel like if we're just going to show up every meeting to have rehash this conversation, that might not be the best option, is just an idea, because that would give us technically 2 months. In addition, let's say we're paying month to month, which would be, put us at about 10/21, would be 9 days before, 9 days after the October meeting in ballpark fashion. And so we would either have to have it figured out by then and be sure of what we wanted to do, even if that is to find a different income area, if that's what the board wants to decide. I think our time frame is, we're squeezing ourselves, so we're just gonna kick it down the road until we either make the decision it almost could be a recurring item on the agenda, is my concern.
Well, the way I see it is, this one page is shown here on the agenda, it shows the effective date is 8/24. So, it'd be like a month and a half. I guess maybe you can get a hold of Jerry and just tell him what the board's concern is.
Yeah, I guess it'd be nice if I had some options as to, or perhaps me and the treasurer, if we had some options, depending on what Jerry says. If he says no, if it'll run out, or, yeah, we can maybe just pay it and then cancel it, I'm not sure, and then get a refund. That maybe that's a possibility. But I have no idea what went into the putting this together, and if we went with somebody else, how much work that would be, and if we'd end up with a good product or not. I'm not saying we wouldn't, I just don't know the answer.
This is an ongoing thing with this South Dakota Public Insurance Company. We've had it for a while.
We've had it for a while, and when Bob Williams was treasurer, and I wish I had the guy's name, the underwriter in town here, we had a pretty long meeting with him, and he went through everything, and we all walked away convinced that this made sense, but that was a few years ago, so I don't remember the details.
Well, the other thing too, it may, I don't know how much it's gonna be for 2 months. This is, we had it for a year per month, but I guess that's just, we'll just have to pay whatever the value is, I guess, for 2 months.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Can I ask, can we visit, and I certainly respect the attorney that's on our board, and his feedback, can we talk to someone in the insurance, somebody who is familiar with the differences to see if that would work for us?
I would think that Jerry Ramick would know that, I mean, the person who's writing this, or representing.
Yeah, either Jerry or the person's name I can't recall right now.
Sure.
I just remember he owns a Tesla, if that helps, but.
Absolutely.
Well, we have a motion.
Well,
Go ahead.
I can understand what Tom is saying, is if we decide in October, no, this isn't what we want, we have about 2 weeks to get some coverage.
Yeah.
I think maybe a year is too much, but possibly pay it through December or something. And in the interim, Dan can talk to Mr. Crambeck and find out, is that doable? Could we just pay the premiums through the end of the year?
Okay.
Comment, yeah.
It sounds like right now we really don't know if it's even an option to pay a partial year, in which case, it might be prudent to, at least have our motion allow paying for a year if we find out that there is no option for less. Personally, it seems like this is what we've had for basically 5 years if it had been Bob Williams or somewhere in that range, and I don't know that another year of this coverage would hurt anything, to make a change a year down the road if there was something that made more sense, for me would be soon enough.
Well, Scott's not here either to talk about it, so this is kind of gonna, the rest of the board members kind of on the spot here, since his bill's due. Tom?
I would like to make a substitute motion that we pay the full 1 year balance and form a committee to look at options when this comes through next year.
All right, substitute motion is in a second to the substitute motion by Dan, just discussion of the substitute motion.
I second.
You're third.
I'm thirded. Or in fourth.
Any discussion on
My
the
bad.
substitute motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the substitute motion to pay it for a year?
Right.
Indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign?
Did we want that committee in the motion?
Yeah, and, excuse me, inform the committee that investigate it.
I'll volunteer McGregor.
I guess he's here.
I think he would want that. Not here.
Well, I guess we don't have to necessarily, have to pick the committee tonight since we're paying for it for a year, but,
Oh, goodness.
we got a year to get it figured out.
I'm not sure I got this. Did Director Nautigal second?
Driscoll,
Oh, she's third.
she was third.
Okay. Okay, so I'm slow here, but I want to get it right. So I have substitute motion by Mack, seconded by Driscoll to pay the invoice amount and form a committee to investigate options for next year. Did I capture that?
Not bad.
Okay.
By both, unanimous by both. All right. Moving along here. Oh yeah, we got somebody here from the USGS. Welcome. Number 8, yep, final presentation by USGS on the effects of dredging on water quality Canyon Lake. And, under Ron's name, but we know it, go ahead.
I don't have anything to say.
Yeah. You can take over. Yeah, stand by the mic.
And you can see the screen there. Dan, you just want to push forward when I give instructions to?
Sure.
Okay. I got a pointer. And disappeared.
Is the pointer work on a LED?
Doesn't work on the LED.
Okay.
It's fine. Shouldn't be an issue. So, well, thanks for having me. For those who don't know me, I'm Galen Hogestrout with the U.S. Geological Survey. Here to give a final progress report for a project that was actually funded in 2 phases over the course of the last 4 years regarding some water quality monitoring on Canyon Lake here in Rapid City. So you go to the next slide, go ahead. I'm going to kind of go back to the beginning, review kind of the objectives and the approach for this short study, think about some of the results, and just go over kind of what we learned as a result of this. So it's still a picture from a previous presentation by Dan Bishop Parks. So you can see the dredger there, and got a couple other pictures of our boat that we used to pop up in my Canyon Lake earlier this year. So go ahead and go to the next slide. Review some of the purpose of this project. So this, it may show up on the agenda and it's kind of related to dredging, but it wasn't intended to be solely for the purposes of looking at just the effects of the dredging. Like we had a couple other objectives. Number one, just to evaluate water quality of Rapid Creek. We're going to compare it to see if it meets current water quality standards, beneficial uses. We want to look at how the water might change. Look at the effects of Canyon Lake if something doesn't change from upstream to downstream. And we want to fill in some data gaps in regards, especially bacteria data. The other kind of group of objectives dealt with water management. So, of course, dredging, which began October 2019 and then got completed after a little COVID delay by the end of 2020. So kind of going back to the time schedule, we had a first phase of this work, which started 2017, 18, 19. At the time we started this, we were thinking that dredging would start sometime maybe 2017. So we tried to plan this for so we just do one phase and then do sampling before, during, and after the dredging. Well, things didn't quite align like we had planned, so we essentially did 2.5 years of baseline knowledge trying pre-dredging work, they're coming back with a second, proposal from these lots to do the after dredging work, which we completed earlier this year. So that was the dredging aspects. Some other things that we were looking at when we began the study is, the waterfowl population. It seemed like there's just been this assumption that we attract a lot of ducks and geese from the lake and all that. There's a perception that has to be impacting the water quality downstream. So we wanted to get some data to look at that. And then also just to fill some gaps with the current water quality monitoring network, which I'll show a picture of later. So next slide. And this is just the same kind of thing stated differently. The different questions that we're trying to answer is, do the waterfowl affect downstream water quality? Does the dredging have any temporary long-term effects to water clarity? And does canning support beneficial use criteria for emerging recreation, also known as swimming? So that's basically the so next slide. As I mentioned, this is the current, what used to formerly DANR water quality monitoring, now known as DANR. So the sites are at Dark Canyon, a little ways above Canyon Lake, and then the next downstream site really evaluates Rapid City's effect is probably down to St. Patrick's Street. So really there's no way to evaluate the effect of Canyon Lake with the current network, just because there's so many other intervening aspects with urban drainages. So just to illustrate that point. Next slide. So the sampling approach, again, we kind of broke this up into two different phases, maybe not intentionally the way we wanted to, but we had 14 sampling visits from 2017 through 2019, and then 4 additional sampling visits post-dredging completed this last year, beginning February through June. Water quality parameters we analyzed, tested for, are shown in the table there. This presentation is attached to the website for those who want to look at this in more detail later. But generally speaking, the water quality parameters we looked at were tied to the water quality standards, the beneficial use criteria. So that included things like E. coli bacteria, total suspended solids, a whole bunch of nutrients, chlorophyll in the lake samples, total organic carbon, to assess the productivity of the lake, and then our field parameters like water temperature, pH, conductance, dissolved action, that kind of stuff. So that's our data we collected. Again, we have 5 sampling locations in the original phase of work. We dialed that back to exclude 2 intermediate lake sites. So if you notice in that map there, there's the Canyon Lake North and Canyon Lake South are kind of an orange color. Those are sites that we didn't include in the second phase, just the cost saving measure. Reasoning for that is based on the first round of data, the lake samples were all very similar in regards to water quality, so it would have been a relatively duplicative effort to include some additional sites there. So we trim that down to only include basically a Rapid Creek upstream site or a Rapid Creek downstream site, and then the lake site close to the dam here to view as part of the lake. Next slide. And you won't be able to read this table for those in the room here, but this is just showing the beneficial use criteria for Rapid Creek. Well, actually, it's just for domestic water supplies, of which Rapid Creek is listed for. But this just shows types of constituents, types of water quality parameters that we're looking for. So the next slide, you can review these later on your own if you want. So again, domestic water supplies, one use. Another use for this water body is cold water permanent fish propagation. That's more commonly known as a trout fishery. So there's some different standards listed there. The one I point out is there's a big one with fish. With trout fisheries, is temperature. You want to keep the water cold, want to keep dissolved oxygen high, And then ammonia is another, listing parameter that I like there. So next one, immersion recreation, more commonly known as swimming. So if you, there's two different kinds of immersion well, there's a partial immersion recreation or something like that, where it's more commonly for those that are wading or you're putting your feet in water to go fishing, but you're not fully going underwater. Then there's immersion recreation, which has slightly stricter standards. So the main parameter with immersion recreation that we're most often concerned with is bacteria. So that's E. coli. I'll point this one out later. E. coli has a daily max standard of 235. Most probable number per 100 milliliters. Okay, go to the next slide. So here's the results table, and again, I'm not following my own rules. I never like to put data tables in a presentation because people want to try to read the numbers. So I'm just going to instruct you right now, do not read these numbers, but they are posted on the website as more of a reference for later, so you can pull these on your own. And then if you do pull this, you can also see there's a red link there to NWIS. That's our USGS database. It's a direct link that pulls together all the sites that we sampled. So if you want to get at the raw data, there should be a hyperlink just embedded within that PDF. You just click on that and it brings you to the actual raw data that we collected for this. So these two slides are going to show basic results from the first phase, 2017 to 19. And then if you flip to the next slide, you'll see results from 2021. So it then puts together nice graphics to compare the two, but I will walk through just a couple notes here in the next couple slides. So
these are average, not median values?
correct. So
Okay.
these are the average values for the two data sets. Now, again, noting that there are some limitations here. If you put this through a statistical test, you notice there's only 4 samples from one data set versus 14 with the other. So it's not an ideal apples to apples, really strong comparison that we can do with this. So that's kind of a quick and dirty way just to look at the data in a more informal way. I just presented an average value for each site, just so we can compare and get a ballpark look at what's happening. So let's go to the next slide. Just highlight some of the differences between what you can refer to as pre-dredging and post-dredging. Again, there will be fewer samples in the 2021 sampling versus the previous 2.5 years in 2017 to 2019. Samples were collected in the cooler weather in the second phase, just because we get out there in February, March, earlier in the spring. So water temp was about 3 degrees C cooler, which in turn means the zone oxygen is going to be a little bit higher in 2021. So kind of can't really compare those just because they're different weather. So total suspended solids was basically near zero. There were only a few samples that had detectable TSS throughout the entire study. That's a reporting limit of 4 milligrams per liter. So I think that was one of the questions of, when you do this dredging, is that going to stir up some of the sediment and is that going to linger in the lake? I think it was pretty evident that it had no lasting impact. There was just really no evidence of TSS lingering in the post-dredging samples that we got out there, basically a month after the dredging was completed. So the water just flushes through the lake pretty quickly, so there's I'm not sure that's no sign there. We'll note the average E. coli concentration is going to look great on the 2021 samples, but that's really influenced by one highest sample concentration was collected in the very last sample in June 2021. So again, it's going to appear that it's higher bacteria concentrations go to 21, but I really don't put a whole lot of whole lot of weight on that, just because it was one high sample and the other 3 samples and 2 earlier in the year were very low or non-detects. So there are some nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus, concentrations, they remain very low. So we weren't anywhere close to touching standards for drinking water supply, is what it says, the nitrate concentration, nitrate standard 10 milligrams per liter that we're mostly concerned with. We were less than half a milligram per liter with nitrogen in other samples. Just everything, ammonia samples are very low, so there's no issue with the fishery standard there. And then the chlorophyll and organic carbon, those 2 indicators were nearly identical between the 2 time periods, so there wasn't a big change in the amount of algae and productivity within the lake between the 2. Let's go to the next slide. We've got 3 more. Putting out on nitrogen. I did plot this up a little bit. So the top the line that plot is total nitrogen. We're showing that the 3 kind of dots are the Rapid Creek upstream within Canyon Lake and then the Rapid Creek downstream. So trying to just indicate that total nitrogen. So total nitrogen includes both the dissolved components and the organic components. That is being reduced. Reduced is probably not the right word in terms of nitrate, but the concentrations are lower as they go through from upstream to downstream. Go to the next slide. This is a really fun one to look at on a small screen. This is bacteria concentrations. It's hard to see on this scale, but when you look at this later, you can see that there's 5 bars. Each of those bars represents Rapid Creek upstream, and then the 3 green bars are lake samples within the lake, and the downstream bar of the cluster is the downstream Rapid Creek site. So each cluster is a sample grade, so there are 18 clusters there. Just a few things that we observed are really the bacteria concentrations. E. coli usually decreasing actually from upstream to downstream, which is somewhat contrary to previous belief when you looked at all the duck population and fecal matter scattered around the lake there. During the summer months, you can typically see the highest concentration, as we typically expect. The higher water temperatures generally get more favorable conditions for bacteria. So before this last year, we had only samples of all of our entire data set that were even above that 100 mpn level, but then again, keep in mind the standard is 235, which we only exceeded in 1 sample, the very last sample from 2 sites, the nitrogen samples. Very infrequent that we would exceed the E. coli standard as it relates to the emerging recreation beneficial use. Next slide. Last one. Okay, so what we've learned, again, just to kind of summarize, bacteria concentrations typically were decreasing from upstream to downstream, somewhat contrary to previous perceptions, just based on what we know about the waterfowl population. E. coli concentrations are below the standard, we just talked about that. And there's some seasonal trends where cooler temperatures generally have lower bacteria counts. Nutrient concentrations are very low. We have very good water clarity in terms of we're just not seeing any detectable TSS. And really what it comes down to as far as the dredging is we couldn't see, and there's a negligible effect on any kind of nutrient or sediment concentration that relates to downstream water quality. So I guess that's a good story. The water quality was just as it comes in the lake is just very good to begin with. So maybe say that, yeah, dredging didn't improve it, but more importantly, it didn't degrade the water quality as it went, further down the stream. So, again, I think that's my last slide. You can go to the next one, maybe a question on the slide. That's it. So, again, to summarize, we've got data stored on our analyst database, otherwise this presentation will be posted, with the summary tables. And I guess if you have any other questions or comments, I'm here now or here by email.
Questions from Gail? Joe?
How often do you think that the lake will have to be dredged?
I don't know if I can answer that.
Depends on how much runoff we have, if the sediment load's high. If we don't have any high intensity rainfall, it's gonna, it's gonna fill up less, and then if we have high intensity, events, there's more sediment that will run into the lake. I mean, it's, the river basically, the dam's in the river, so any sediment come down, it's settling out. So it's just depends. Yeah.
When had it been done previously, do you recall?
Yeah, 1993.
That was fairly,
94, when
that
we
was,
did the Canyon Lake Restoration Project.
that was fairly soon after Westbury Trails fire. I don't know
It was.
if there were, to what amount of sediment loading occurred from
It was,
that.
I mean, it was obvious that there had been some of that material that had run into the lake during that
Yeah.
operation. Plus, we didn't dredge it, then we drained the lake.
Right.
Used heavy equipment to remove it.
And that's what they intended to do, was that 2015 or so, when they rebuilt the dam, but then the flows became too high for the diversion, so they kind of had to go to plan B with the boat drainage system.
So it was quite a time period between dredging and the Canyon Lake Restoration Project.
Right, it's been 25 years.
Yeah.
Whatever.
That's
The
right.
last time, it's probably your best starting point for a guess.
Well, we got a dredge now, we can be back in there. Or, Ron Coastal's involved, they put that pipe in there to drain the lake. Under a certain, I don't know, the average flow of it, what the design was for that.
One, if I push 30 that's through it, then you gotta maintain, pumping on the valve downstream there and try to take any overflow.
Yeah. So,
So it's a fall project,
so, you
fall
know,
winter project.
so the next time the city may use that pipe to drain it, they can bring heavy equipment in there. There's a very solid bottom to it. And you have front end loaders in there, and it was a lot shorter period of time too, to do it that way. Any other questions from Gail? Go ahead.
Yeah, Galen, so you say that you don't think the E. coli is being caused by waterfowl because of the trend from,
Hear that, it's,
and I'm wondering how,
especially during the waterfowl population is highest out there in the kind of winter and spring months. And
okay,
if you look back at our bacteria charts, I think the bacteria were actually the lowest during the months, which again seems counterintuitive and maybe just public perception, but at least what we were seeing was the E. coli concentrations on the downstream that are lower than the upstream.
so I don't really remember the results of our DNA study, but I know there's a dog park up there too
Yeah.
that seemed to, and other mammals in the hills, so that would, but there was, I don't think there was much human
You know,
E. coli at that point.
how that view from that study, we didn't see much for the human sources.
Okay, I'm just trying to put this together.
Any more questions for Gail? No favors. Do you have a question for him?
Galen, I apologize. The first data set was basically pre-dredging, and then 21, this year is post-dredging. Were you doing any sampling of like Rapid Creek downstream of Canyon Lake during the dredging? I mean, that's what, presumably you're stirring up the sediment some of that might have been escaping downstream to be picked up as elevated TSS.
Right.
That's some monitoring location.
We weren't doing that. It's possible, you could look at the dates that DNR was out there at the farther downstream site on Bottom End. I think, maybe going back to how we originally planned it as that's what we would have been doing, but the way things worked out with, given the way that it started, and even when we got started, and started for about a month, and then COVID kind of took over, and things are, things didn't go according to plan. So I guess, long answer of saying, no, we won't sample during the dredging, but I think that there could be indeed in our sample farther downstream. Right?
Well, thanks again for coming and giving us this report.